Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Coaching Conversations. This is our final discussion of this series on shame, and we've already spoken about shame in the body triad and in the heart triad, and today we're going to talk about shame in the head triad. So we've got 8s, 9s, and 1s at the top of the Enneagram symbol in the body triad, and we already talked about how they're concerned with the totality of existence, objective truth. Is the world good? Is it just? Is it peaceful and harmony, right? Just looking objectively, is that the case? And how each of those types try to fix that. They feel upset and angry that that's the case. They try to fix it. And when they're either too much or not enough to try and fix that, each of those types experience shame. And then we talked about the heart triad and how the heart triad looks at the totality of existence and says, well, if that's not right, then what does that mean for me and my identity and my significance in the world? And of course, our identity and significance in the world is a relational construct. So the heart triad is concerned with relationships, and am I too much or not enough in relationships? And we talked about how that contributes to shame as being right at the surface, that primary emotion. Anger is certainly primary emotion for the body type, but shame is right at the surface for the heart type. We talked about that yesterday. So today we're going to talk about the head triad, and the head triad is the fear triad, called the fear triad. Because whereas the heart triad looks up at the totality of existence, the objective truth that we see in 8s, 9s, and 1s and says, what does that mean for my identity? Then the head triad looks up and says, well, then what does that mean for my safety? What does that mean for my safety? And so if that's the consideration for the head triad, then of course, fear is what's going to be right at the surface for the head triad. What if I'm not safe? If the world is not good, just, and at peace, then I must not be safe. That's going to affect my safety in this myriad of ways. And then each type in the head triad tries to get their safety met through different modes. But that doesn't mean they don't still struggle with shame. Shame is just lower on the totem pole for the head triad, but it's still there. So let's talk about how each type might experience shame. So shame, as we talked about, has like a coin with two sides. We've got too much or not enough. Anytime we feel too much or not enough, we feel kind of shamed. And 5s, they want to be competent. They believe that they can outthink fear. They can gather enough resources, enough wisdom, enough knowledge. They kind of pull away, being in that withdrawing stance. They want to be unaffected by life. So they pull away from everyone and anything that might drain them in order to gather up enough energy, knowledge, wisdom, competence, resources to be safe. So 5s can feel like they are not enough when they're confronted with the reality that there's always more out there. There's always more knowledge, there's always more wisdom, there's always more information, there's always more research, there's always a bit of mystery in the world that we're not going to reach the end of it. And so when 5s are bumped up against that, the first feeling is fear. Oh my gosh, if there's more out there and I cannot get it all, will I be safe? Because I feel safe when I have everything I need, which means information. And information helps me know what to do, what resources I need. So if information is lacking, everything else is lacking, and that creates fear in the 5. But then after the fear, it's going to go to shame. It's going to go to shame. What if I can't protect myself? What if I can't protect my family? 5s feel a great sense of responsibility. Actually, 7s, 6s, and 5s feel a huge sense of responsibility, because not only do they feel like I'm not safe, but they notice that there's a bunch of humans in this world and none of us are safe. And their orientation to that being the most important thing to be concerned with means that they're also kind of concerned with everyone else's safety. Maybe not to the same degree, but they bear this weight of responsibility. Not only do I need to keep myself safe, but I need to be a source of wisdom and information for others to keep them safe. If I can gather enough resources for me and my family, then I have the responsibility to keep my family safe, to foresee possible downfalls and dangers and guard against that. And when 5s are bumped up against the possibility or a situation that they were not competent enough, prepared for enough, and something undesirable happens to them or their family, there's a sense of shame. I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. Fives can also feel a sense of shame of not being enough in the area of relationships and relational connections. Because fives want to be competent in everything, and there's no handbook you can read on people. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if each person came with a handbook? Like, hi, I'm Vanessa Fernandez. Here's my Vanessa Fernandez handbook relationship guide. If you read all of those things, we will have a fantastic relationship. It tells you all the things I like, all the things I don't like, exactly how to talk to me, and we can just make a formula out of this relationship. Sound good? Sound good. Fives want a formula for everything, and there's no formula for human interaction. And so fives typically shy away from things that they know they'll never be fully competent to the degree that they would want to be, right? There's just no way we can be fully competent in relationships to the degree that we would want to be from study and research. The only way to do so, to be really competent in relationships, is to get out there, be in relationships, and make a ton of mistakes. And what's the thing that fives worry about the most? Making mistakes publicly for others to see. So fives shy away from relationships typically because it's a place that they're not going to feel competent on right away. And because of that, that just perpetuates then the fear of relationships. And so fives can feel like they're not enough in relationships, and that can be an area of shame as well, because it's just one of those tricky situations. It doesn't come with a handbook. It's so disappointing. I would personally love a handbook for relationships too. So fives, I get you. Let's move on to sixes. Sixes also are focused on security, but they're focused on security in a little different way than fives. Rather than isolating and detaching and making a storehouse of information and resources, sixes actually go the opposite direction and want to be supported by a community, be supported by others, be intertwined and interconnected, and feel that community support, look to others to help them understand what's the right thing to do, what's the best thing to do. Sixes want to experience safety in numbers, right? That idea of we're safer in numbers. We've got a community around us. So sixes can feel shame when they are not enough and they're not able to fulfill their responsibility to the group. When they feel like maybe they've fallen short, maybe they've overcommitted. Because of that desire to be so supported, they also feel like, well, if I want to be supported, I have to support. There's a give and take here. And so I want to do my part, and then my community will do their part. But what if there's an overcommitment? Because the more nervous that sixes feel, the more they commit to doing things out of fear, which never is a grounded, wise place to make commitments out of, right? So sixes can tend to overcommit, and then when they can't fill that commitment, or maybe not to the standard that they would like, or they have to cancel on things, that's where sixes can feel that not enough. Fear is my primary motivator, but after I'm fearful and overcommitting, then I can't fulfill that, and then I feel not enough. Sixes can also feel too much because their minds are constantly going. Sixes are in the head triad, so they're overthinkers. And they can just think and think and think and think themselves in circles and not trust their own judgment, and then try to get others, because they've processed verbally, try to get others to help them think through. And they can tell, man, I feel like I'm a little too much. I feel like all my thoughts, all my words, all my round and rounds feels too much for me. And I feel like maybe it's too much for this person that I'm trying to share it with. And there's that feeling of shame. Too much, not enough. That's where sixes can feel it. For sevens, being also in the head triad, they are overthinkers as well. They're concerned with safety, very much so. But they go on the offensive rather than the defensive. So fives are probably the most defensive, sixes are somewhere in the middle, and sevens are offense all the way. Rather than detaching from people and gathering up resources and pulling away, sevens say, you know what, I'm gonna outrun my fear. I'm going to have so many options and so many things to do, and I'm going to chase after enjoyment, right? What's the opposite of fear? Well, I'm afraid of pain. The opposite of pain is pleasure, so I'm just going to stuff myself with pleasure, metaphorically speaking, to the point where pain will never catch me. Pain will never catch me. So that's how I'm gonna not be afraid, is just stuff myself with pleasure so I never have to even look at pain. It's never gonna get me. The problem is 7s then feel like there's never enough pleasure to outrun pain. Because I never know when it's coming, right? I never know when it might come out of nowhere. Life is unpredictable. Life doesn't feel safe and secure. So there's never enough pleasure, experiences, options for me to actually feel safe enough to breathe, to be satisfied in this moment. Fear's always kind of like lurking right there, like, oh, it's on my heels. I have to stay one step ahead of it. If you guys watched Aladdin, when just watching it with my kids, and he's like running away from the guards, and the minute that his foot like leaves something, a guard's hand was like whoosh. That's how 7s can feel. Like, I can't stop. I'm only one step ahead. I'm only one step ahead of my fears. So I can't stop. And then 7s can feel like all of this doing, all of this pleasure seeking, all of these options not only feels too much to them, they can tell that it's feeling too much to some people around them. And 7s can feel that shame of, oh, I feel like I'm too much. It's fear driving the bus, but the shame still there, a little deeper under the surface. 7s can also feel like I'm not enough as well, feeling like I'll never find enough. I'll never be satisfied. I'll never be satisfied. And that shame of maybe that there's something wrong with me, that I'll never be satisfied. Not realizing that it's being fueled by fear. It's being fueled by fear. So my encouragement to those in the head triad is the moment that you can sink into a basic trust. And I don't have time to get into what basic trust means. That's a whole other video. But there's this idea of basic trust, and depending on your religious background, that can take many forms. But all of us need to have this concept of basic trust, that there's something bigger holding the world, us, each moment. There's something keeping this heart beating. There's something that when we fall asleep at night, we know we're gonna wake up in the morning. There's something that makes us know the sun's gonna rise. And the more connected we are to that basic trust, the more we can start letting fear fall away. And then the shame also starts retreating. But when we feel that we are on our own, I am on my own. There is nothing else holding me. There is nothing else supporting me. There is nothing else out there. That's when fear heightens and shame heightens. So my encouragement to you when it comes to shame, press into basic trust. Start thinking about what keeps you from really resting in trusting that there's something else out there. And the minute that you can kind of start doing some work around that, both fear and shame start to melt away.